Lieutenant Maravesh stood motionless at the viewport of listening post Tango 4. Her keen eyes, fixed on the asteroid field, sprawled before her like a hunter's snare. Shadow Reach, they called it. A contested fragment of space caught in the gravitational tug-of-war between Galactic Confederation territory and the ever-expanding human colonial frontier. "Anything interesting out there, Lieutenant?" Pater Shan's voice broke her concentration as he approached. Data slate in hand. Her second-in-command was a practical man, more concerned with protocols than possibilities. "Just rocks and cosmic dust." "Shan," she replied, not turning from the view. "But it's the perfect place to hide something you don't want found." The listening post was austere, even by GC military standards. A hardened shell of reinforced composites anchored to a stable asteroid, designed to monitor and intercept communications across this disputed sector. The six-person intelligence team operated under strict orders: observe, report, but never engage. They were the watchers on the wall, the silent sentinels of Confederation interests. Mara's team had been stationed here for 3 standard months, cataloging routine merchant chatter, distress signals, and the occasional pirate frequency. Nothing that justified their presence. Nothing that validated Mara's instincts that this sector warranted closer attention. Until now. "Lieutenant," called the communications officer from her station. "I'm picking up something. Structured. Definitely not background radiation or stellar noise." Mara crossed the cramped command center in 4 strides. "Source? Grid coordinates Alpha 79er. Deeper in the field. Signals weak but consistent." Mara leaned over the console, studying the waveform patterns. "Encryption?" "Basic but effective. Military grade, though not GC standard. The patterns suggest—" The officer hesitated. "Suggest what? Specialist?" Mara pressed. "Human communication protocols, ma'am. Old Earth military, if I had to guess." Mara's spine straightened. "Can you clean it up? Extract any clear content?" "Working on it." The specialist's fingers flew across the holographic interface. After several tense minutes, fragments of the transmission emerged through the static. "Go. Alpha team to Formation Delta. Supply drop at coordinates. Next training rotation begins at Oro 600. "Training rotation?" Petter echoed, exchanging glances with Mara. "And listen to this segment," the communications officer continued, isolating another fragment. "Commando candidates to report for assessment. Obstacle course completion times improving. Weapons drill after evening meal." Mara's expression hardened. "Record everything. I want a complete analysis of terminology, accent patterns, and any background noise that might indicate their setup." She turned to Pater. "Prepare a priority transmission to High Command. Classification: urgent intelligence." Within hours, the response arrived. "Confirm presence of human military installation in disputed territory. Deploy recon team for visual verification. Observe only. Do not engage unless defensive measures require. Await extraction or further orders." Mara assembled her team in the briefing room, 4 of her best operatives plus Pater. The holographic display showed the intricate tangle of Shadow Reach's asteroid field, with the suspected location pulsing red at its center. "We deploy in 6 hours, she announced. "Our mission is simple. Confirm the existence of what appears to be a human commando training facility, operating in violation of the border treaties." "A training facility?" one of the operatives questioned. "Out here? In this debris field?" "Precisely why they'd choose it," Mara replied. "Isolated. Difficult to navigate. Perfect cover for activities they'd prefer to keep hidden from Confederation eyes." Petter studied the tactical display. "How are we approaching? The sensor nets will be dense in this region." "We'll use the stealth skiff. Manual navigation through these 3 corridors." Mara highlighted the approach vectors. "Passive sensors only. No emissions that could trigger alerts." "And if we're detected?" another operative asked. Mara's gaze was steel. "We're an intelligence unit, Not an assault team. Our priority is verification and extraction. If compromised, we scatter, go dark, and rendezvous at the emergency coordinates. As the team prepared their equipment, Mara found herself drawn back to the viewport. Somewhere in that field of tumbling rock and ice, humans were preparing for war, training commandos. The implications troubled her more than she cared to admit. The border treaties had established an uneasy peace between the Galactic Confederation and the human territories. Both sides maintained conventional forces at agreed-upon strengths. But special operations units, the Ghost Squads, the Infiltrators, the Saboteurs, these were strictly regulated. A covert training facility suggested the humans were expanding their commando capabilities in secret. It was precisely the kind of provocation that could reignite the conflicts that had nearly destroyed both civilizations a generation ago. 6 hours later, the team's stealth skiff detached from the listening post and slipped into the asteroid field. Mara piloted manually, her enhanced reflexes navigating the treacherous debris with practiced precision. The vessel was little more than a carbon fiber shell wrapped around minimal life support and sensor systems, designed for stealth, not comfort or combat. Approaching sensor perimeter, Peter reported from the co-pilot station, detecting automated buoys at 1 kilometer intervals. Pattern? Standard grid, nothing sophisticated. Mara frowned. That seemed almost too simplistic for a military installation. Scan for secondary systems. Humans are fond of redundancies. After a moment, Peter nodded. Good call. There's a subsystem. Micro-drones moving in random patterns. We'd have triggered them if we'd continued on this vector. Adjust course. 30 degrees ventral, then thread between these 2 larger asteroids. Mara indicated the path on the navigational display. Clever setup. The obvious grid makes you focus on the gaps, driving you right into the secondary net. For 3 hours, they navigated the increasingly dense field, evading detection systems that grew more sophisticated as they approached the coordinates. Finally, Mara guided the skiff into the shadow of a massive, cratered asteroid and powered down to minimal systems. We're within visual range, she announced. Suit up. We continue on EVA from here. The team donned their recon harnesses, lightweight exoskeletons equipped with minimal thrusters, thermal regulation, and optical camouflage. These weren't combat suits, but they'd keep the team alive in vacuum and, more importantly, invisible to most detection systems. They exited through the skiff's airlock in practiced sequence, their magnetized boots securing them to the asteroid's surface. Mara signaled, and they moved in formation across the cratered landscape, using the natural features for cover. At the asteroid's edge, they paused. Below them, in the void between their position and the next large body, floated what appeared to be nothing. Visual enhancement, Mara ordered through the secure comm channel. Her helmet systems adjusted, filtering the emptiness until shapes began to resolve. Camouflage netting, Peter observed. Military grade. It's disrupting our optical sensors. Adjust to thermal, Mara commanded. The view shifted, and suddenly, the nothing bloomed into clear structures. Habitat modules, anchored between smaller asteroids, connected by guide cables. Training areas carved into rocky outcrops. And movement. Dozens of heat signatures moving in disciplined patterns. I count 37 distinct heat signatures, one operative reported. Moving in formation. Appear to be drilling. Mara enhanced her view further. The heat signatures resolved into clearer shapes. Human figures in environmental suits, moving through what appeared to be tactical exercises. But something was off about their proportions. Those aren't standard human dimensions, she murmured. Peter adjusted his own sensors. You're right. They're smaller. Subadults, Mara realized with dawning comprehension. They're training children. The revelation sent a chill through the team. The use of juvenile combatants was prohibited under both Confederation and human legal codes. Yet here was evidence of systematic training of underage recruits. We need closer imagery, Mara decided. Shan, you and Kellis hold position here as our relay. The rest of us will descend for detailed reconnaissance. With minimal thruster burns, Mara and two operatives detached from the asteroid's surface and began their careful approach toward the camouflaged facility. They used debris for cover, drifting between floating rocks to mask their movement. As they drew closer, the details became clearer. What they had initially taken for a single training ground revealed itself as a complex of installations, living quarters, supply caches, an infirmary, and multiple training zones. All expertly concealed among the asteroids, all operating with military precision. And everywhere, young humans. Most appeared to be between 12 and 16 standard years, moving with the coordinated discipline of soldiers twice their age. They navigated obstacle courses, cut into the asteroids, practiced zero-gravity combat maneuvers, and conducted what looked like survival drills. This isn't just a training facility, Mara communicated to her team. It's a full commando academy. They continued their approach, using the camouflage netting itself as cover. Mara signaled one of her operatives to deploy a microdrone for closer observation of what appeared to be the central command module. The drone had barely cleared their position when a sharp flash erupted from below, followed by the drone signal vanishing from their monitors. "We've been compromised," Mara hissed. "Defensive positions." But before they could react, a net of fine metallic mesh erupted from a concealed launcher, enveloping one of Mara's operatives. The operative's thrusters fired automatically, but the net's weights only tightened around the struggling figure. "Pressure-sensitive tripwire," Peter's voice came through the comm. "They knew exactly where we'd approach from." Mara made a split-second decision. "Shan, extract operative Naris. Kellis, maintain relay position. Vex, with me. We continue the mission." As Peter maneuvered to assist the ensnared operative, Mara and Vex used the distraction to slip deeper into the facility's perimeter. They followed what appeared to be a main throughway, a cable pathway along which the young trainees transported equipment and themselves. "Activity increasing at the central hub," Vex reported, indicating a larger structure anchored to a stable asteroid fragment. "Looks like our disturbance has them mobilizing." Mara studied the movement patterns. "No, this is too organized for a response to our intrusion. This was already planned." She indicated several groups converging from different sections. "They're assembling for something." They positioned themselves in the shadow of a supply module, enhancing their optical sensors to peer into the central structure. Inside, approximately 20 young humans had gathered in formation before an older figure, an adult, standing at least a head taller than the trainees. "Can we get audio?" Mara asked. Vex deployed a directional microphone from his suit's utility pack. After a moment of adjustment, fragments of speech filtered through their comms. "Me. Proud of your progress," the adult figure was saying. A woman, middle-aged by human standards, with the bearing of a veteran. "Today's exercise will test everything you've learned about adaptive tactics and environmental manipulation." The trainees stood at rigid attention, their young faces set with determination that seemed incongruous with their age. "Team Alpha will defend the command post," the instructor continued. "Team Bravo will attempt infiltration and asset capture. Remember, in vacuum, there is no room for error. Your suits are your life. Your team is your survival." Mara watched, fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. These were children, yet they carried themselves like hardened soldiers. Their equipment was scaled to their smaller frames, but otherwise identical to adult military gear. Nothing about this was improvised or amateur. This was a professional operation with significant resources behind it. "Lieutenant," Peter's voice came through the comm. "Naris is secure, but we've triggered something. Picking up encrypted transmissions from deeper in the field. Reinforcements could be inbound." Mara calculated their options. They had confirmed the facility's existence and gathered preliminary intelligence on its nature. Protocol dictated withdrawal at this point. "Stand by for extraction," she ordered. "We've seen—" Her command was interrupted by a sudden flurry of activity below. The young trainees had dispersed, moving with practiced efficiency to various positions around the facility. What had been an ordered training ground transformed into an active tactical scenario. "Live fire exercise," Vex observed as training weapons were distributed. "Should we withdraw now?" Mara hesitated, her mission parameters warring with her intelligence officer's instincts. "No. This is our chance to observe their methods in action. We stay until the exercise concludes or until Shan confirms inbound hostiles." For the next 20 minutes, they watched as the two teams of trainees engaged in a complex simulation. Team Alpha fortified the command post with improvised barriers and sensor countermeasures. Team Bravo split into smaller units, probing for weaknesses while establishing diversionary tactics. The sophistication of their maneuvers impressed even Mara's professional assessment. These weren't simply children playing at war. They employed advanced infiltration techniques, counter-surveillance measures, and tactical communication that would challenge seasoned GC operatives. "This goes beyond standard training," she communicated to her team. "These are specialized infiltration tactics, Commando protocols." As the exercise reached its climax, with Team Bravo executing a coordinated three-point breach of the command post defenses, Peter's urgent voice broke through the comm. "Lieutenant, multiple signatures approaching from the field's edge. High velocity, military drive signatures." "Extraction window?" Mara demanded. 8 minutes, maximum?" Mara made her decision. "All operatives, converge on the skiff. Prepare for emergency departure." As she and Vex began their withdrawal, a new transmission cut across their secure frequency, clear, deliberate, and speaking perfect Confederation standard. "Confederation Recon Team. This is Shadow Reach Facility Command. Your presence has been logged. Be advised that you have entered a protected training zone under Article 7 of the Border Treaties. You are directed to withdraw immediately." Mara froze. How had they detected their communications? And more troublingly, how did they know exactly who they were? "Accelerate extraction," she ordered her team. "Maintain communications blackout." As they retreated along their entry vector, Mara risked a final glance at the facility. The training exercise had halted. The young recruits now stood in formation, their instructors moving among them with purpose. And then, to her astonishment, several of them looked directly toward her position, impossibly finding her, despite the optical camouflage. One of the older trainees stepped forward, unfurling what appeared to be a unit flag. Black background with a stylized silver emblem she couldn't quite make out. The trainee planted it firmly on the asteroid's surface, then raised a hand in what could only be interpreted as a salute. Directly toward Mara. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the vacuum surrounding her suit. They hadn't just detected the team's presence. They had tracked her specifically, identified her as the leader, and were now acknowledging her as a worthy observer. Before she could process this development, the approaching signatures Peter had detected resolved into sleek, matte black vessels, Ghost Squadron interceptors, the elite of human special forces. Their arrival transformed the urgency of extraction from tactical to existential. "All operatives, maximum thrust to extraction point," she commanded. "Evasive patterns. Now." The team converged on the stealth skiff, with barely a minute to spare. As they secured themselves inside, and Mara initiated emergency launch procedures, the external sensors captured one last image of the training facility. It was empty. In the brief minutes of their extraction, the entire operation had vanished, equipment stowed, personnel withdrawn, even the camouflage netting reconfigured to show nothing but empty space. Only the planted flag remained, standing defiantly on the barren asteroid surface. "Remarkable discipline," Peter commented as the skiff accelerated away from Shadow Reach. They must have drilled that evacuation hundreds of times. Mara nodded, her thoughts troubled. Those weren't just any trainees. Those were something else. The return to Listening Post Tango 4 was tense but uneventful. The Ghost Squadron vessels had not pursued them beyond the asteroid field's edge. Another puzzling development. It was as if the humans had simply wanted them to see what they had seen, then leave with the knowledge. Back at the listening post, Mara compiled her report for High Command with meticulous care. The evidence was clear. Humans were training commando units composed primarily of juveniles, operating in disputed space under the protection of their elite special forces. Analysis suggests these are not conventional recruits, she wrote in her classified addendum. Subject physiology, movement patterns, and tactical awareness indicate specialized conditioning from early development. Preliminary assessment, human special forces, youth variant confirmed. She paused, her fingers hovering over the interface as she considered her final recommendation. The border treaties provided clear protocols for military violations in disputed territory. The discovery of this facility justified a formal diplomatic protest, possibly even limited military action to neutralize the threat. Yet, something held her back. The discipline she had witnessed, the efficiency of their operations, the salute from that young trainee, it spoke of something more complex than a simple treaty violation. With decision made, she completed her report. Recommend continued surveillance rather than direct intervention. Facility demonstrates unprecedented capabilities that warrant further study before engagement. These are not simply children being exploited for military purposes. They represent a new adaptive strategy that demands comprehensive assessment. She transmitted the report, then returned to the viewport where this mission had begun. Shadow Reach continued its silent tumble through the void, its secrets now partially revealed but no less mysterious. "You're troubled," Petter observed, joining her at the viewport. "Wouldn't you be?" she replied. "We just confirmed that humans are training children as elite commandos." "Perhaps," Petter said carefully. "But I saw something else out there. Those weren't frightened conscripts or brainwashed cannon fodder. They moved with purpose, with pride." Mara nodded slowly. "That's what disturbs me most. The border treaties were built on certain assumptions about both our civilizations. What we saw today challenges everything we thought we knew about human society and their military doctrine." "So what happens now?" Mara's gaze remained fixed on the distant asteroid field. "Now we wait. High Command will analyze our findings, adjust their strategic assessments. The diplomatic corps will lodge their protests. The military will update their contingency plans." "And the children?" Peter asked quietly. Mara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "That's the question that will keep me awake. Sean, are they victims to be rescued? Or are they the vanguard of something we've never encountered before? And which answer should frighten us more?" As if in response, the communications array chimed with an incoming transmission. Not from High Command, but from the disputed zone they had just left. A narrow-beam communication directed specifically at their listening post. The message contained no text, no verbal communication, just an image. The unit flag they had seen planted on the asteroid, now displayed in full resolution, its emblem resolved into clarity, a stylized human child's handprint superimposed over a field of stars. Beneath it, a simple inscription in both Confederation Standard and Human English. "The children of necessity become the guardians of possibility." Mara stared at the image, understanding dawning like a cold star. This hadn't been a chance discovery. Their entire mission, from the intercepted transmissions to their undetected reconnaissance, had been orchestrated. The humans had wanted them to find this facility, to report its existence, to carry this message back to the heart of the Confederation. But why? As a warning? A demonstration of capability? Or something more complex? A move in a greater game whose rules she had yet to comprehend. Whatever the answer, one thing was certain. The uneasy peace between their civilizations had just entered uncharted territory, and the children of Shadow Reach stood at its center. Bah! 6 months later, Lieutenant Mara Vesh stood before the Confederation Security Council, her dress uniform immaculate, her posture rigid as the asteroid rocks of Shadow Reach. The chamber was imposing by design, vast curved walls lined with the representatives of 100 worlds, all focused on her testimony. Lieutenant, the council chairperson began, your discovery has profound implications for Confederation security. These human commando trainees, you describe them as juveniles in your report. Please clarify for the council exactly what you observed. Mara met the chairperson's gaze evenly. I observed approximately 50 human youths between the estimated ages of 12 and 16 standard years, engaged in advanced military training. Their activities included tactical exercises, weapons drills, and survival scenarios consistent with special operations preparation. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The chairperson raised a hand for silence. And in your professional assessment, were these children coerced, exploited? We need to understand if this represents a human rights violation requiring humanitarian intervention. The question hung in the air, weighted with diplomatic and military implications. Mara had anticipated it, had prepared her answer carefully during the long journey from the border sectors to the Confederation capital. Chairperson, council members, I cannot speak to the recruitment methods or the circumstances that brought these young humans to the facility. What I can report with certainty is that I observed no signs of coercion during operations. The trainees demonstrated high morale, unit cohesion, and voluntary participation in all observed activities. You almost sound admiring, Lieutenant, noted one of the military representatives, his tone sharp. I am reporting factual observations, sir, Mara replied coolly. Admiration or condemnation would exceed my mandate as an intelligence officer. The chairperson studied her for a long moment. Your report recommends surveillance rather than intervention. Many on this council find that recommendation insufficient. Explain your reasoning. Mara straightened, knowing her next words would shape Confederation policy toward the human territories for years to come. The Shadow Reach facility represents a significant evolution in human military doctrine, one that we do not yet fully understand. These are not conventional child soldiers as historically documented in human conflicts. They display characteristics consistent with highly specialized commando units, adaptive thinking, technical proficiency, and tactical creativity that suggest years of careful development. She paused, gathering her thoughts. More importantly, they operated under the direct protection of Ghost Squadron assets, the most elite human special forces. This indicates the program has sanction at the highest levels of human government. Any intervention would likely trigger a severe military response, potentially destabilizing the entire border region. So we should simply allow this treaty violation to continue? Demanded another council member. I am suggesting that we need to understand it before we confront it, Mara countered. The border treaties were negotiated when our understanding of human society was still developing. This facility suggests capabilities and adaptations we had not anticipated. The council chambers fell silent as her words settled over the assembled representatives. Finally, the chairperson spoke again. Lieutenant Vesh, you have spent more time studying human military operations than perhaps anyone else in this chamber. In your assessment, what does this facility represent? A preparation for aggression against the Confederation, or something else? Mara considered the question carefully, thinking back to that final image transmitted to their listening post, the child's handprint over stars, the cryptic message about necessity and possibility. Chairperson, the evidence suggests this is not preparation for offensive operations. The training emphasized infiltration, survival, and extraction, defensive and reconnaissance skills, rather than assault tactics. These are not the vanguard of an invasion force. She took a deep breath before continuing. I believe we are observing an adaptive response to a perceived existential threat. The humans are preparing their youngest, most adaptable generation for operations in contested space, not to conquer, but to survive. Survive what, Lieutenant? The chairperson pressed. Mara met their gaze directly. That is the critical question we should be asking. What do the humans know or fear that would drive them to such extraordinary measures? Perhaps, instead of focusing on whether to dismantle this facility, we should be investigating what prompted its creation. As the council deliberated, Mara was dismissed to a waiting area outside the chambers. She found Peter there, promoted to captain following their mission, but still serving as her right hand in the newly formed Human Adaptation Analysis Unit. How did they receive it? He asked quietly. About as expected. Outrage, confusion, strategic concern. She settled into a chair beside him. They're debating intervention options now. And will they listen to your recommendation? Mara's expression was grim. The Hawks want a strike force. The diplomats want formal censure. Nobody wants to ask the question that matters most. Why? Peter nodded. Why train children as commandos when adult special forces would be more effective? Exactly. Mara leaned forward, her voice dropping further. Remember that training scenario we observed? The way those young trainees adapted to changing conditions, improvised solutions with minimal resources? Hard to forget, they outmaneuvered defenses that would challenge our veteran units. There's something else we didn't include in the official report, Mara said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. The neurological scans our sensors captured during the observation. Peter's eyebrows rose. I don't recall any neural data in our sensor package. That's because I ran the analysis privately. The readings showed heightened neuroplasticity patterns, brain activity consistent with accelerated learning, and environmental adaptation far beyond adult human norms. You're suggesting they're not just training children because they're available. They're specifically selecting for developmental advantages? Mara nodded slowly. The human brain reaches peak neuroplasticity between ages 12 and 16. Maximum adaptive capacity, optimal pattern recognition, enhanced skill acquisition. What if this isn't about exploiting children at all? What if it's about harnessing capabilities that simply don't exist in adults? Before Peter could respond, the chamber doors opened, and an aide beckoned Mara back inside. The council had reached a preliminary decision. Lieutenant Vesh, the chairperson announced as she resumed her position at the testimony podium. The council has voted to establish a dedicated intelligence task force to monitor the Shadow Reach facility and any similar installations we may discover. You will command this task force, with authorization to conduct surveillance operations within the disputed territories. Mara acknowledged the directive with a formal salute. And the diplomatic response, Chairperson? A formal inquiry will be transmitted to the human authorities, requesting clarification on the purpose and scope of these training operations. However, the chairperson added, their tone significant. This inquiry will be classified as a routine treaty consultation rather than an accusation of violation. The implication was clear. The Confederation was choosing caution over confrontation, at least for now. As Mara exited the council chambers for the final time, her communication implant chimed with an encrypted alert. A new transmission had been detected from Shadow Reach, another narrow-beam message directed specifically to Confederation intelligence channels. When she accessed the content in the secure viewing room, she found herself looking at footage from what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. The young trainees she had observed 6 months earlier stood in formation, now wearing formal uniforms, bearing the same emblem, the child's handprint over stars. As she watched, one trainee stepped forward to receive some kind of commendation from the instructor. The camera angle shifted, and Mara found herself looking directly at the instructor's face for the first time. middle-aged, weathered by years of service, with eyes that had seen more than their share of conflict. The name badge was clearly visible. Captain Elena Riker, Human Defense Force. The face triggered an immediate recognition alert in Confederation databases. Captain Elena Riker, former prisoner of war, captured during the last major conflict between human forces and the Confederation. According to her file, she had been held for 3 years in a Confederation military detention facility before being repatriated during the prisoner exchanges that preceded the border treaties. The significance wasn't lost on Mara. This wasn't just any instructor. This was a veteran who had experienced Confederation captivity firsthand, now training the next generation to operate in Confederation space. The footage continued, showing the graduating trainees receiving their unit designations and deployment orders. Most were assigned to frontier outposts and border stations, defensive positions rather than forward staging areas. Not the deployment pattern one would expect for units preparing for aggressive action. As the ceremony concluded, Captain Riker addressed her charges directly. The audio was crystal clear, obviously intended for Confederation ears. Remember your training. Remember your purpose. You are not weapons. You are witnesses. You are not invaders. You are inheritors. The space between our civilizations need not be a battlefield. It can be a frontier of understanding. That is your true mission. The transmission ended with a final image. The graduating class, standing before their unit flag. Their young faces solemn with the weight of responsibility they had assumed. And at the bottom of the image, a timestamp and coordinates, an invitation for Mara's next observation mission. She closed the file, her mind racing with implications. This wasn't just intelligence gathering anymore. This was dialogue, conducted through observation and demonstration rather than words, but dialogue nonetheless. The humans were showing her exactly what they wanted her to see, guiding her understanding of their actions. "Pater," she called, summoning her second-in-command with a gesture toward the screen. "Prepare a recon team. We have new coordinates." "Another training facility?" he asked, studying the data. "No," Mara replied thoughtfully. "A deployment. They're showing us where these graduates are being stationed." She highlighted the coordinates on the galactic map. "This position, it's not a military installation. It's some kind of research outpost on the edge of the Veil Nebula." Petter frowned. "Why would they deploy commando units to a research station?" "That," Mara said, "is exactly what we're going to find out." 3 weeks later, their stealth vessel drifted silently near the coordinates they had been given. The Veil Nebula stretched before them, a vast curtain of ionized gas and stellar remnants that created a natural boundary between Confederation space and one of the less explored regions of human territory. The research outpost was immediately visible, a sprawling collection of modules and sensor arrays anchored to a stable planetoid at the nebula's edge. Its design was unmistakably human, but it lacked the military profile Mara had expected. No weapons platforms, no defensive shield generators, nothing to suggest a fortified position. "Life signs?" she asked the sensor operator. "Approximately 200 human signatures, mixed ages, from juvenile to elderly, consistent with a civilian research population." Mara frowned. "And our graduates?" The operator adjusted the sensors, detecting 12 signatures matching the biometric profiles from the Shadow Reach data. They're distributed throughout the facility, primarily near the outer modules and sensor arrays. "Sentry positions," Petter observed. "They're providing security for the outpost." "But against what?" Mara wondered aloud. "There's nothing threatening in this sector. No Confederation presence. No known hostile species." As if in answer to her question, the nebula before them pulsed with sudden energy, ribbons of charged particles dancing in patterns too regular to be natural. The outpost's sensor arrays pivoted in unison, focusing on the disturbance. "Energy spike," reported the sensor operator. Massive quantum fluctuations within the nebula. I've never seen readings like this. Mara stared at the swirling patterns. What are we looking at? Specialist? If I had to guess, some kind of spatial anomaly. A thin point between dimensions. Perhaps. The readings suggest matter-energy conversion at scales that shouldn't be possible. On the outpost, activity increased. The graduates from Shadow Reach moved with purpose, securing sections of the facility and escorting researchers to protected areas. Not panicked evacuation, but practiced emergency protocols. They were expecting this, Mara realized. That's why they're here. They're not defending against us. They're monitoring whatever that phenomenon is. As they watched, a portion of the nebula seemed to fold inward, creating a dark aperture in the luminous gases. Something emerged, a shape that defied easy classification. Neither ship nor creature, but something that incorporated aspects of both. It pulsed with internal light, extending appendages that seemed to taste the surrounding space. Unknown entity, the sensor operator reported unnecessarily. No match in Confederation databases. The entity drifted toward the research outpost, its movements deliberate, yet alien. From the outpost, no weapons fire emerged, only intensified scanning and what appeared to be attempts at communication. And then, to Mara's astonishment, one of the Shadow Reach graduates detached from the outpost in what looked like a heavily modified EVA suit. The young human drifted toward the entity, carrying some kind of device that emitted pulses of light in complex patterns. They're trying to communicate with it, Petter said incredulously. That's a first contact protocol. The entity paused, its appendages withdrawing slightly as it oriented toward the approaching human. For several tense minutes, they drifted in proximity, the human continuing its light pulse communications, while the entity responded with shifting patterns across its surface. We need to record everything, Mara ordered. Full spectrum analysis. The standoff, if that's what it was, continued for nearly an hour. Finally, the entity began to retreat toward the anomaly in the nebula, its purpose apparently fulfilled. The young graduate remained in position, still transmitting light patterns, until the entity disappeared back through the aperture, which sealed itself behind it. Only then did the human return to the outpost, where they were met by a reception committee that included Captain Riker herself. They knew, Mara said softly. They knew these incursions were happening and deployed their graduates specifically to monitor and establish contact. But why keep it secret? Petter wondered. This is exactly the kind of situation where cooperation between our civilizations would be beneficial. Mara's expression was grim. Unless they had reason to believe we wouldn't cooperate, that we might react differently. The implication hung between them. The Confederation's policy toward unknown entities had historically been cautious to the point of hostility. First contact protocols existed, but they were secondary to security considerations. Unknown entities were treated as threats until proven otherwise, often with disastrous consequences for peaceful contact. We need to report this, Petter said finally. Yes, Mara agreed, but very carefully. What we just witnessed changes everything we thought we knew about the Shadow Reach program. Back at their forward base, Mara composed her report with even more care than her initial discovery. She documented the anomaly, the entity, and the human response, emphasizing the non-aggressive nature of the interaction and the apparent success of their communication attempt. The evidence now suggests, she wrote, that the Shadow Reach facility, and others like it, are not preparing for conflict with the Confederation, but for contact with unknown entities emerging from spatial anomalies along the frontier. The specialized training these young humans receive appears focused on adaptive communication and first contact scenarios, rather than combat operations. She paused, considering how to frame her next observation. The deployment of juveniles specifically for this purpose suggests a deliberate strategy, leveraging their neurological advantages, heightened learning capacity, reduced preconceptions, and optimized pattern recognition to facilitate communication with truly alien intelligences. Finally, she came to her recommendation. In light of these findings, I formally request authorization to establish direct contact with the Shadow Reach command structure. The entities emerging from these anomalies represent a potential concern for both human and Confederation territories. Cooperative monitoring and response protocols would serve our mutual security interests. She transmitted the report directly to the Security Council, bypassing the usual intelligence channels. This was too important for bureaucratic delays. The response came within hours, a priority communication from the chairperson themselves. Contact authorized. Proceed with caution. Full diplomatic package follows. Attached was a formal introduction protocol and authorization to reveal her identity and mission to the human authorities. This was unprecedented. Field intelligence officers were never authorized for direct diplomatic contact. 2 days later, Mara's vessel approached the research outpost openly, broadcasting Confederation identification codes and a request for parley. The response was immediate: coordinates for a docking approach and a formal acknowledgement of her diplomatic status. As she prepared to board the outpost, Pater approached with evident concern. "Are you certain about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we cross this threshold, there's no returning to the shadows. Your career as a covert intelligence officer effectively ends." Mara adjusted her uniform, diplomatic gray rather than intelligence black, a visible symbol of her changed status. "Some discoveries demand stepping into the light. Sean, this is one of them." The airlock cycled, and Mara found herself face to face with Captain Elena Riker. In person, the human instructor was more imposing than her transmissions had suggested, tall, even by human standards, with the coiled readiness of a veteran operative. "Lieutenant Vesh," Riker greeted her, extending a hand in the human custom. "Or should I say, Envoy Vesh now. Your promotion came rather suddenly." Mara accepted the handshake, noting the strength in the human's grip. "You've been expecting me since you first observed Shadow Reach," Riker confirmed with a slight smile. "We've been waiting for the Confederation to be ready for this conversation." She gestured down the corridor, leading Mara deeper into the facility. "You have questions. Many of them, I imagine. I'll answer what I can." "Let's start with the obvious," Mara suggested as they walked. "Why children? Why train juveniles for what appears to be first contact scenarios?" Riker nodded, as if appreciating the directness. "What do you know about neuroplasticity, Lieutenant?" "Enough to understand it peaks during adolescent development in most species, including humans." "Precisely. But for humans, it's more pronounced than most Confederation species realize. Our adolescents don't just learn faster, they adapt fundamentally. Their neural networks reconfigure in response to novel stimuli in ways adult brains simply cannot. They entered what appeared to be an observation deck, its viewport offering a panoramic view of the nebula. Several of the young graduates Mara had observed were stationed at monitoring consoles, their attention fixed on the swirling gases beyond. "The entities you witnessed," Riker continued, "we call them Veil Walkers. They began emerging 5 years ago, shortly after we established this research outpost. Initial attempts at communication, by adult researchers, failed completely. The entities either ignored our presence or retreated immediately. But the children succeeded where adults failed," Mara surmised. "Not immediately," Riker corrected. "But they approached the problem differently. Adults tried to establish communication based on mathematical principles, assuming universal constants. The younger researchers suggested a different approach: mimicry and pattern matching. They observed the entities' movements, their light emissions, their electromagnetic signatures, and began replicating them with variations. Adaptive learning rather than structured protocols," Mara nodded. A child's approach to language acquisition. Exactly. Riker gestured toward one of the graduates, who approached with a data tablet. This is Elian. He was part of the first successful contact team. The young human, perhaps 16 standard years now, nodded respectfully to Mara. Lieutenant, your observation reports were quite thorough. We've studied them as part of our training. Mara blinked in surprise. You've read my reports? Of course, Riker said with a hint of amusement. Just as you've read ours. Intelligence flows both ways across borders. Elian offered the tablet, which displayed complex patterns of light and motion. These are the communication sequences we've established with the Veil Walkers. We believe they perceive reality through quantum state fluctuations rather than conventional sensory input. Their language consists of probability patterns rather than discrete symbols, which is why adults struggled to establish contact. Mara realized. Adult brains seek definitive patterns, categorical frameworks, but quantum communication exists in states of probability and uncertainty. And children, Riker added, especially those with the neurological profiles we select for, are comfortable with ambiguity. They don't try to force the communication into existing frameworks. They allow new frameworks to emerge from the interaction itself. Mara studied the patterns on the tablet, her mind racing with implications. So, Shadow Reach is one of several facilities preparing the next generation of contact specialists. Riker confirmed. Not soldiers, though they receive security training for their own protection, but communicators, bridges between our reality and whatever exists beyond the veil. And the secrecy? Why not approach the Confederation directly? Riker's expression hardened slightly. History, Lieutenant. The last 3 first contact scenarios involving Confederation forces ended in armed conflict. Your protocols prioritize security over communication. We needed to develop our program without interference. And the border treaty violations? A calculated risk, Riker acknowledged. We established the facilities in disputed territory deliberately, visible enough to be discovered eventually, but ambiguous enough to avoid immediate military response. We needed you to find us, Lieutenant. We needed you to report what you saw. You were testing our reaction, Mara realized. If we had responded with force, then cooperation would have been impossible, and humanity would have continued this work alone. Riker gestured around the observation deck. But you didn't. You observed. You questioned. You recommended restraint. You proved there were elements within the Confederation ready for the truth. Mara absorbed this, her intelligence officer's mind cataloging implications, even as her newly appointed diplomatic role considered possibilities. And now, what happens next? That, Riker said, depends on what you report back to your council. The Veil Walkers are just the beginning. The anomalies are increasing in frequency and distribution. Whatever exists on the other side is taking an interest in our reality. You're proposing cooperation, Mara stated. Joint monitoring, shared protocols. More than that, Riker corrected. We're proposing a joint training program. Your species has neurological variations that could complement our approach. Together, we might establish more comprehensive communication than either civilization could achieve alone. The proposal was breathtaking in its scope, and its implicit trust. After generations of uneasy peace and mutual suspicion, the humans were offering to share not just information, but methodology, to combine their most promising young minds with Confederation counterparts. The Council will have concerns, Mara said carefully. Questions about oversight, about the ethical implications of involving juveniles in potentially dangerous contact scenarios. Of course, Riker nodded. We expect nothing less. But consider this. Lieutenant, the Veil Walkers have shown no hostility, only curiosity. What if this is the opportunity both our civilizations have been waiting for? a common purpose beyond our historical conflicts. As if on cue, the nebula beyond the viewport pulsed with new energy. Another anomaly forming, another potential contact. The young graduates moved with practiced efficiency to their stations, preparations already underway. Mara watched them. These children of necessity, who might indeed become guardians of possibility. Not commandos training for war, but pioneers preparing for a future neither human nor Confederation had anticipated. "I'll need to observe your full operation," she said finally. "Document your protocols, your safety measures, your training methodologies. The Council will require comprehensive assessment before considering any joint initiative." Riker smiled, the first genuine expression Mara had seen from the veteran commander. "We expected nothing less, Lieutenant. In fact, we've prepared quarters for your extended stay." She gestured toward one of the facility's side corridors. "Your second-in-command is welcome as well. Captain Shan, isn't it now?" Mara allowed herself a small smile in return. "You've been thorough in your intelligence gathering, Captain Riker. As have you, Lieutenant Vesh. Perhaps that mutual attention to detail will serve as the foundation for what comes next." As they turned back toward the viewport, a new Veilwalker emerged from the anomaly, larger than the previous entity, its patterns more complex, its movements more deliberate. The graduates adjusted their communication protocols accordingly, adapting to the new patterns with the fluid responsiveness that only their young minds could achieve. Mara watched, no longer an observer from the shadows, but a participant in a moment of profound potential. The children of Shadow Reach had been training not for war, but for this, a future where communication transcended the limitations of adult understanding, where the next generation might forge connections that their parents could only imagine. In her mind, she was already composing her report to the Council. Not an intelligence assessment this time, but a diplomatic proposal. The border treaties would need revision, not to strengthen barriers between civilizations, but to create frameworks for cooperation. The disputed territories could become zones of joint operation rather than potential flashpoints. And the children, those remarkable, adaptable, neurologically gifted children, would lead the way. "They're not just the future of human special operations," she murmured, more to herself than to Riker. "They're the future of both our civilizations." Riker nodded, her gaze fixed on her young charges as they established contact with the new entity. "That, Lieutenant, is exactly what we've been trying to tell you." As the Veilwalker responded to the graduates' signals with patterns of increasing complexity, Mara understood what she had really discovered in Shadow Reach. Not a violation, not a threat, but an invitation to step beyond the confines of adult certainty and embrace the adaptive possibility that only the next generation could fully realize. The children of necessity had become the guardians of possibility indeed, and in doing so, they had opened a door between worlds that neither humans nor the Confederation could have unlocked alone.